Thank you for joining us for another Hacker Hangouts on another wonderful weekend where we get to talk about DEF CON, which is like one of my favorite topics. I'm wearing my DEF CON hoodie, which is oh so comfortable, but we're not that far away from it. In the call for everything is open, art and papers and artists and music, and I love seeing it on the DEF CON forums because it's going to be DEF CON 30 this year, which is going to be ginormous. It's going to be Caesar Forum, which is just huge. And what I love about that Caesars Forum is it's going to be everything under one roof again, in theory. It's not going to be a bunch of different hotels across Paris and Flamingo and Bally's and Caesars and everything. It's going to be like all of the hackers under one roof, which is so cool. But today, Call for Papers is open. And what that means is everyone is able to submit to be a musician, to be a speaker at DEF CON. And we wanted to take some time talking through really how to go about submitting it, some of our favorite talks. And it's not just like the newest 0 days that are landing. And I think with that, Gator, do you have anything to add to that?
So there are so many ways to do DEF CON. I'm not going to say that there's a wrong way, but you grow in time with how you learn how to go through and do DEF CON correctly, right? Or how you best embody DEF CON. So first year that I went, man, I went to every single talk I could possibly do back to back to back to back. And then years later, I figured out, hey, I could meet people. This is what DEF CON is for me. And then I started volunteering. And I'm like, this is even better. I get to meet so many more people. So,
well, that was really similar to mine as well. It's like the first con I ever went to was like the first couple conference, all I did was go to all the talks, and it took me a bit to branch out. And maybe that's probably a great place to start is like your first DEF CON. Was it all about the talks? Was it all about like, we're talking about the call for papers and everything being open, but like, were those the things you wanted to focus on at DEF CON when you first started?
So my first years, yes, because I was trying to get into the industry. So I wanted to just immerse myself into everything. And to this day, I went to talks that I found practical things that I could go and change at work and help with that. And then I sat in through one talk, which was talking about how Metasploit 2 was going to Ruby on Rails and how it's easy to develop programs for it. And that went whoosh. But I got the exposure to it, and I'm like, ooh, what's this Metasploit thing? And I got to go play with it, which opened up new avenues to go learn something new. So yes, absolutely. I went to the talks for the first 2 years back to back, and then started hanging out at the different conferences. This was way back when it was at like the Riviera. Then going and hanging out like at 4 a.m. in one of the just social lounges. I got to hear about guys who were going through and tuning their cars before that was a thing, tweaking the computers on the cars. I'm like, this is awesome.
So this is actually a really good exposure. Like a lot of people get this impression that you go to DEF CON and every single talk out there is going to be some Gucci hack, some Gucci 0-day vulnerability, something in SE Linux or Microsoft or maybe even Hyper-V or whatever. But the truth about DEF CON is that they do a pretty good job of having a wide array of accessible talks. Everything from, I remember one of my first and favorite talks was the elevator hacking talk, which was a couple of guys that were like talking about how they social engineered access to fireman keys to every elevator in the country, and talking about how to get on top of an elevator and how you really shouldn't, because it is one of the most dangerous places on earth, because you have complete control of the elevator and you can very easily crush yourself, right? But if you go through like
the
one
old
of
the Mission Impossible movie where the guy's sitting on top of the elevator, right. Oh, it's terrifying.
Yeah. So, I mean, like one of the cool things about this, and one of the things you learn about DEF CON is that it is very accessible, where you might go sit down at talks and you might not understand a lick of what they're trying to tell you. But then there's going to be another talk on like I think it was last year or the year before, they were talking about hacking a Tesla in order to cause it to crash. That talk ended up getting canceled because that talk was essentially how to build a radar jammer, and that is incredibly illegal, right? So like you also run into talks like that. But that talk, like the funny thing is I quickly went through the slides. That talk isn't particularly novel. It's just really interesting given the current events with with Teslas and all of those things, and us wondering how to handle autonomous cars, right? And so that's one of the things I think you can learn by going through, even if you don't have an intent to submit a paper or submit music or submit a workshop or any of those things. Going through and looking through the call index for each of these things and looking what it takes to apply to each of these things, you get a sense for what DEF CON is looking for, which is not necessarily the best papers in the world. Like, they're certainly going to entertain those things, but they're not necessarily looking for that for every single contribution. They want a wide array of content so that you can get beginners to come and enjoy some of the talks, and then maybe go out and do a workshop and maybe do this. And I think that is one of the things that I learned over time. When the first con I went to, I was like, I don't know what anyone is talking about on stage, and I have no idea what I'm doing here, but if I'm just here, maybe I'll absorb some knowledge through osmosis. And over the years, I started to recognize, no, they've done a really good job of curating their talks to be accessible to even the general public.
Well, I think that's something which is really cool, because if you look at the FAQ for like talk submissions, one, like the barrier of entry is, I don't want to say low because that makes it sound like it, but like they do want that wide variety of expertise. But in the FAQ, it's like, what happen if I haven't spoken at a security conference before? Does that disqualify me? If I don't have a white paper or a presentation built, does that disqualify? And the answer is overwhelmingly no. And I think also the other piece of this is they want the expertise along the whole spectrum across a bunch of different fields. Like, one of my favorite was like Jason Scott talking about text files and text-based adventure games, like how those things were built and how the logic in them worked, which was just like really easy, like fuzzy logic. I think the other, my favorite one was Zaz's stolen computer. So this wasn't like an overly technical talk. This was someone broke into his house or his apartment, stole his computer, brought it back home, and either they sold it, but they plugged it in. And all of a sudden, 6 months later, he found out, oh, I can still remote into this thing, and they didn't format it. So all of a sudden, he starts pulling his images back, which ended up being the person who synced their phone into it. And it goes over the story of getting the system back with all of this person's information they were putting in. And like, it's not an overly technical talk. I even like when you talked about the Tesla hack, that one was, I believe it was like, Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek. What I loved about that hack was it wasn't like a crazy 0 day. It was vulnerabilities strung together, but it was the story of it. And this is what I think my favorite talks have been, is like the story ones, which go across, here was the thought process, here was the methodology we went through to help us go from step A to exploit. It's not like, okay, here's our exploit code, but like, here's the story and here's the thought process.
So if you're going to go down that route, one of my favorite ones that I got to see live was DEF CON 22, Weaponizing Your Pets, the War Kite and the Denial of Service Dog. The story and the tech that was along with that. Okay, they're using Hack 5 gear. They're building it themselves. They're it was awesome because you got the story along with, hey, this was the problem I was trying to solve. And then this is how the problem evolved over time. And now here's this 45-minute story of this amazing talk, which I'll drop a link to it.
I was gonna say, what about you, Gulo? What have you seen from the years that you've been going to DEF CON with call for papers, with the talks they accept? What do you think?
So they accept the entire gambit of everything. I've been to some really incredible talks, and I've been to talks where honestly I wish I had tomatoes with me to throw on stage. You can have a really good subject that you talk about. You can have something incredibly interesting, but if you have zero presentation skills, then the talk is going to crash and burn. Or you could be a really great presenter and have the worst absolute content on the planet, and you can still make it fun and entertaining for people. Some of my best talks that I've been to, I don't really, even when I first started going, I didn't really go to talks. My first DEF CONs was for the alcohol and debauchery. It was great. But going to some of the talks that went on was, Fjordor gave an awesome talk on Nmap like 15 years ago. That was phenomenal. There was a intro to DEF CON. On Thursdays, they have talks that try to acclimate you newbies to how DEF CON works and how things flow. And I decided I was going to sit in on one of those talks like a decade ago. And they were talking about how to get caught with drugs in Vegas and then how to hire prostitutes in Vegas. And it was a really, really great talk of all the reasons you're going to get arrested and the best ways to mitigate the charges against you when you do get arrested at DEF CON.
Interesting.
So Practice had a question as to whether or not any of us had presented. To my knowledge, I don't think any of us have presented at DEF CON. I've submitted papers, and I've presented at B-Sides Las Vegas. Have you guys presented anywhere?
I have at DEF CON. I've done one village talk. I have, and then at GurCon I've presented, but DEF CON I've never actually submitted. I've never even submitted a call for papers, which is kind of interesting, I guess. I never felt like I had like anything to share. And I know that sounds goofy, but it was always like when you look at some of the talks there, you're like, wow, these are incredible. It's like dropping a 0 day or something like that. But for me, it was like always like you get that like, what am I really going to talk about, Gulo?
I did a presentation in a Sky Talk. I wasn't part of the Sky Talk. I attended the Sky Talk, and the panel that was on stage drugged me up on stage to help with their presentation and describe things. I was part of the hackerspace way back when, and yeah, they dragged. I sat down for like the entire Sky Talk to help out, which was kind of weird.
I did do a Sky Talk. I did actually forget about that. It was kind of a little bit of an impromptu one because they opened it up. They're like, hey, we have an open thing. Anyone want to get up and start sharing? So I started sharing about the ransomware I was creating to like do a proof of concept on, which was, again, it was an impromptu one though.
Sharing is caring.
So I've never gone through presented at DEF CON directly. I've presented at other locations, but it's a goal of mine. So ultimately, one of the things I just heard most of us say is that we didn't know what we could talk about. And as long as we're talking about geeks and stories and sharing that's one of the things that there's the imposter syndrome that we've touched on in the past. We've all got stories to share. Now, whether they're outside of being prosecuted for is a different deal, but we all have stories to share. So why not submit? What's the worst case, the thing that they're going to tell you? No. And then here's how to improve. Perfect. Now there's something for me to be able to go improve on.
Gator is in transition. He no longer has this big fancy background. So he is unfortunately at this point where he is like trying to survive in a room, but he's willing to jump on stream with us with a little bit of background noise. So we'll bear through it. Gowrie, I see you dropped a link to your chat. Yours was it was the halting problem, which is like one of my favorite things we can talk about.
No, it was about basically this design for virtual breakpoints that a buddy of mine had come up with when we were running into another problem building our virtualization software. And we thought like this is the fun part. Like I got a paper accepted to B-Sides Las Vegas. We had a properly formatted paper. It was scientific-ish. It like had a good design, had a good long talk. If you guys want to watch it, it's like 45 minutes long. There were some decent questions in there. And then 3 years later, I dug up a paper I think called a design for architectural support for shadow memory, which used completely different verbiage to describe the exact same problem and the exact same solution, except it was like 15 years prior to us. And, during all of the academic searches that I had done, I just hadn't dug up that particular paper. But the cool thing of that is like, this is something that I learned from that, and something that you should take if you're thinking about submitting a paper, take this to heart, because you're going to hear people constantly say what Silk said, which is, I don't think I have anything that is worth submitting. And oftentimes there will be ideas that you'll have that you're like, somebody has to have had this idea before, but I can't dig up a paper. That's literally what occurred to me. I got accepted. I gave a talk on it. And then I found somebody else's paper from 15 years prior. And I was like, that's really interesting. Well, at least I brought the idea back into the forefront. And B, people would be like, oh, they'd feel bad, like they almost plagiarized someone else's work. Hadn't read the paper before, but I think it's actually if two different groups independently come to the same conclusion on how to solve a problem, then that's probably the way to solve the problem, right? And I thought that was really cool. So, like, if you're afraid of submitting something that may have been submitted before, it may have been submitted before, it may even have been presented before, but that doesn't mean they won't pick the talk up again, because it could be interesting in light of recent events. It could be interesting in light of a lot of other things.
I think what's
Well-
interesting is when I'm looking at a lot of the talks, even like the top talks, it's funny because some of them do fall into like, here's this cool thing I did, here's this story from A to Z of how I exploited. But then there's also like conceptual talks, which are like, the Calvary isn't coming, which actually started the whole I am the Calvary movement, which is kind of fun because it's talking about, like, for instance, like what when these massive hacks happen, like who's defending against them? Can we go after them? Like the ransomware and things like this. And it started that whole movement of I am the Calvary. And that one was just a conceptual one. It was like a community-based one, which is really cool. I feel like Jason Street has done a lot of community-based talks, which aren't like, this is a cool exploit, but I think he is one of my favorite speakers there just because he has such an interesting story and such like an approachable personality too. One of the few people I feel like I could talk about on stream and not have it like bite me in the butt about other ones, but Jason Street's just a fantastic talker.
I was really glad to see him become the community lead when it came to the DEF CON groups. And I have a picture from way back in the day of, hey, I got my awkward hug from him. And I'm like, woo!
He gives very wonderful awkward hugs.
There was one talk I went to. If you go to the talks, I haven't gone to talks in years, and actually decades now. One of the reasons I will go to a talk is the breakout session at the end. I went to a talk that Hackajar gave on password cracking, and this was as my mind blanks out, not John the Ripper. What's the one that uses the video card for cracking hashes?
Say that one more time. I was looking at chat.
What cracks hashes using a video card? What app?
A bunch. Hashcat. John the Ripper can do it.
Yes, Hashcat. So the guy that wrote Hashcat, Hackajar, was on stage and he was like, hey, I paid this guy a lot of money. I sent him some gear and he just quit responding to me. He was writing this password cracker for me, and it was Hashcat. And Hashcat's like, yeah, I'm that dude in the audience. My internet died. My computer exploded. My house burned. He had a whole, he had his little speech thingy. And that was the start of Hashcat. And afterwards, they had the breakout session for that. I sat down with like industry giants, like Bcrypt was in there, and they were teaching how hashing works, how encryption works. And the breakout session, we lasted the entire of the breakout session. I learned so much from that breakout session. It's one of my best memories from DEF CON. And even after the breakout session, we all went to the pub and we got a beer and we sat down and we talked and talked and talked and talked. And just sitting down and listening and asking questions for things that I didn't know, it was a phenomenal experience. So going to the talks, yeah, you can learn from the talks. Granted, they're all usually posted online. Just go watch them online after the con. But if you want to interact with people, the breakout sessions are phenomenal, and you can learn so much more from those. Don't be shy. Ask questions. They're there to help you. They're there to help you grow. Some people will judge you. Some people will argue and such. But for the most part, DEF CON's a really safe environment where you can ask questions and learn, and people will teach you, and they will be excited about teaching you.
Yeah, something to note here is there was a question, do the talks say if there will be a breakout session? That is entirely up to the presenter. So it is not a requirement that there's a breakout session afterwards. They obviously highly, as far as I know, like, to be clear, I'm not on the planning staff for DEF CONs, and I'm certainly not a call for papers organizer or anything. But my understanding is that that's entirely up to the presenter.
I think something which is really cool here is when we talk about a lot of the presenters, a lot of them have presented before, and I think that's also like, it feels like there's a big barrier to entry because it's like, I haven't presented before, and it was fun. I was looking at the FAQ, and I don't want to misread it, so I'm going to read it as I'm talking, which is, if I've never spoken at DEF CON or a similar con, will that negatively impact my chance to being accepted? and I love this because it's so cool. Like, if you've never spoken at a con before, but have done other things like video blogs, or you enjoy speaking, where you can show your abilities as a presenter. But even if you're completely new to presenting, don't worry. Submit a thoroughly researched, interesting talk with a complete outline and captivating slides. But if you don't have those, you're also the type of speaker, the speaking noob, that reviewers love to give a chance to because you've shown you take pride in your submission. And I think it hits that passion mark, which is, it doesn't matter if you've speaking before. If you love your topic, like, go ahead and present it. And I think that's the biggest thing they're looking for in a lot of the call for papers is passion, and then thoroughly researched, but more thoroughly presented. Like, they even give, like, here are the things that will pretty much disqualify you right away, which is that you have an abstract, that you follow the instructions for this, but you don't necessarily need slides and a white paper and all of that published, which I do like. And that's why I think you get a big variety of the talks.
There's
for sure. Like one.
Gulo?
There's a comments on chat that that Squiddy P dropped.
That's what I was going for.
If you've never been to DEF CON before, if you want to go to DEF CON, go to DEF CON. There's no such thing as unworthy to attend the conference. If you want to learn anything, if you want to integrate with the community, if you're just interested and you're not in security, if you're not in computers, I mean, I have friends that are nurses that attend DEF CON. I have friends that are like burlesque dancers. I have all kinds of people that I interact with at the con, and it's just a giant conglomeration of random people coming together that are super passionate about something. It doesn't have to be anything specific. Just be passionate about something. Go learn, go talk, go interact. If you feel that you're ever uncomfortable, if you need a guide, if you need some help, come find me.
No. If you're feeling uncomfortable, don't go find Gulo. Like, just, that's a terrible idea. No, there's no cost of entry to DEF CON. It's go geek out. Like, this is like one of those weird ones. It's like it saddens me that there's this weird vibe sometimes where it's like, oh, I'm not good enough to go. I had someone message me on one of the comments saying at one point I'll be good enough to go to DEF CON, and it's like, what are you talking about? Like, we're all noobs in this industry. Like, there are no experts. And I love that phrase. I think it was like John Hammond started saying that over and over, and I freaking love it. There's no experts in this field.
One of the things I like to say is that DEF CON is much more a doing conference than a telling conference or a talk conference, right? So, like, you think of conferences, like DEF CON is unlike any other conference that I've ever been to, period. And I've been to Comic-Con, I've been to a ton of different, Otakon. It's unlike any other conference that I've been to, because when you walk in, there's a bunch of free things to do. Like, you can sit down and engage with random people and work on a contest, or not even a contest, just like sit down and hack some stuff up at the Hardware Hacking Village. And there are people there to teach you how to do stuff, and like real tangible skills that you can use in your everyday life or even professionally, right? So, like, kids come to DEF CON to do that, right? So because their kids are not professionals in any way, and if they can come and learn how to do everything from hardware hacking to binary exploitation, literally everyone in the world can come. The thing I was going to say about the DEF CON call for papers is, when we say that it's very informal, it's literally a text document that you open it. You can just copy and paste it in a notepad, fill it out, and then email it. You literally email it to them, and that's it. It's not like there's no submission form. There's no like traditional way, because I've also submitted and presented at academic conferences. It is not an academic conference in the traditional sense, if you will. It's not ranked as an academic conference, even though that there are papers and things presented there that very well could be at Usenix and other places. But it's a doing conference. Go there to learn something. But yeah.
I think you just hit it on the head. You're going there to learn something new. You don't have to be at a certain level. And I wish I would have started going sooner, because I thought the same issue. And instead, I found a welcome community that basically I could walk into any given room and say, hey, I'm new. I've never done this before. Can you teach me? And there are dozens of people that pop up and say, oh, yeah, come here. Let me show you how to pick this lock.
Oh, go on.
So this is I was going to say, this is actually a good segue, because we've been talking about the papers and the talks for half an hour, but there's a lot of other things that they're calling for, right? They call for, I mean, the calls for CTFs and contests and villages are closed. And the reason why those are closed is because if you're sitting in March and you don't know whether or not you want to do those things, you're way past it. You need to have already been planning like now for next year, basically. So those are closed, but there's demo labs, there's music, there's workshops, there's call for demo labs, music, and workshops, call for parties and meetups. And then there's vendor and press applications. And Dark Tangent just announced that there is a call for trainers because this year they are doing something that the entire community has been asking them to do for a very long time, which is on the Monday and Tuesday following the conference, hold trainings, which are not as expensive as the Black Hat trainings, because I think like Black Hat trainings get me in the tens of thousands of dollars.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
And Black Hat's right before DEF CON, right? So they announced that they put out a call for trainers, or there will be a call for trainers put out later this month, where they want to see what trainings they can get in on that Monday and Tuesday. And it'll be after the con hours, so there won't be any more, crazy stuff going on, so you can actually focus in your hungover stupor, which I think is really cool. But the one thing I was going to say is the call for music is kind of interesting because it's a call for music, but they even say like, we're calling all musicians, DJs, rappers, and other audio-visual artists. If you're interested in performing on the DEF CON main stage, and you can submit those things. While we've traditionally accepted DJs who play electronic music, we wish to eagerly expand our eclecticism. So you also get this idea that like, if you've been to DEF CON before, there's always raves in the evenings, and there's always pool parties where, they have DJs and it's a giant party. I would really like, my wife goes with me. She is a physical therapist and a belly dancer. I think it would be dope one year if they had like electronic music and like pop locking belly dancers as a thing. And so Michelle's even talking about like, do you think I could submit a paper on doing a talk on, physical therapy and staying healthy as a hacker? Or do you think, I could go do something as a performer there? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome.
Legitimately, like, right, we've talked about this one before, and this one like legitimately excites me because like we've talked about this. I have zero interest in watching another exploit or 0 day because like it's what I do for a living. Like I need to keep up with that. That's work to me. I don't want to go to that talk, but like a healthy hackers one, or like who was it? Infosys? I think it was Infosister. No, it was someone else. Which was talking about hacker mental health. And they set up this whole like mental health village where you could go like talk to a therapist about stress or get a massage or any of these things. But like the talk about like health, like Gowrie, I don't know if you feel like comfortable sharing this on stream. I was so interested, your reason of going to a split keyboard, because that alone would be like, because you learned that from a physical therapist talking about like why your wrist started hurting because it was this motion.
Yes, I learned that from my physical therapist, also known as my wife. Yeah. So, but it's literally the reason why I went to, you can see it here. The reason why I went to a split keyboard is because a standard keyboard, you're in this position while you're typing. And when you go to use the mouse, you end up doing this motion a lot as you're going back and forth. And I started getting wrist pain here rather. And she basically did the human debugger thing and was just like, well, let me watch how you're working. Oh, it's probably this. So why don't you get a split keyboard? So now when I move to the mouse, I'm just moving like a parallel motion. It's not as big. And that honestly did it. And that's actually why I asked her at one point, I was like, do you think it might be interesting to give like a how to be healthy as a hacker talk at DEF CON? And you could totally submit that paper. And she's like, yeah, I probably could give like a 30-minute presentation on that. And I was like, that would probably get accepted. And that's kind of one of the cool things about DEF CON is I looked at that on its face. I was like, yeah, that would actually probably get accepted. And I think a lot of people would go to that talk.
I think they would. I mean, this is another part of the contests. Nikita was messaged, and I want to see if I can do it this year. But with the video gooning and things like that, I know I'm going to get pulled away. But there used to be a Coffee Wars contest at DEF CON, and this is like a perfect example. It's like if everything's just like technical hacking pen test, it gets boring. It's all the same. And I love the fact that there was like a coffee wars on who can make the best cup of coffee. Gulo, it looks like you're about to jump out of your chair.
They have the beer cooling competition. I've got friends that run that now, and that's been going on for years. Can you cool? How quickly can you cool a beer down to this very precise temperature? And it has to be this exact temperature. And then you're graded on how long it takes to cool it and the temperature that you actually hit and how long it can stay at that temperature. So that's been a contest at DEF CON for 15, 16, 17 years now. It's been around for a long time.
Well, that's kind of like goes back to like we talk about the barrier of entry for contests and things like that. It's like they can't all just be pen testing and security testing. This is like I think the longest, oldest contest is Scav Hunt, which is legitimately go come up with unique ways to go find every item on this list. And that's a great way to go out. Something that which actually harkens back to someone in chat talking about like, I'm a noob or things like that. Like I think there is something like awesome at DEF CON because there's like the rule of leaving a space in your group, which is if everyone's standing in a circle outside anywhere in the conference, you leave a space in the group, which allows anyone to walk on up, and then you expand the circle to open another group. And I think my favorite thing was like sitting like I did a whole slew of videos last year on HelmetCon, which is like all these like crazy Wi-Fi helmets they put together with cool LEDs and things like that, but they would actually do like war driving with them. And legitimately, they just had open slots for anyone to sit down and start talking to them, which made them super approachable. The thing which is kind of funny about it, though, anyone I've known who is, and again, known is a strong word, acquaintance, who was like that douchey security person. We've all met one before who's the smartest person in the room. They're usually weirdly short. I don't know why. Like, two people come to mind. But they come into the room that they're the smartest person in the room, and those are the people no one wants to hang out with at DEF CON. Like, legitimately, you walk up and you're like, I'm smarter than you. And they're like, oh, that's great. Let's go like move tables and stuff like that. Where anyone who walks up and they're like, I know nothing about any of this. Teach me, or like show me how I can teach myself. Like, you go to hardware hacking or soldering village or lockpicking, like those are the people like get me freaking pumped because they're the ones who like want to learn. Like, I love those people. Love anyone who wants to learn because I'm one of those people because I know nothing at that conference to sit down and be like, teach me, senpai. Maybe not that bad, but like,
to your point, it's like, hey, there's a strong possibility that the person who wrote the tool is in the room. So there's always somebody smarter than you in the room. So you should be going there to learn and be able to have conversation because you never know who you're going to run into, which is the exciting part about it. So, yeah, I mean,
it is always funny when you sit down at a table and you start talking to someone and you're like, yeah, I heard about this one time someone did that one thing, or like whatever it was. Like, I think when I first met Dan Kaminsky, it was like one of those things as I was talking to him about like the DNS thing. And I know he's like one of the key holders. And it was like, he's like, I'm Dan Kaminsky. I never had matched his face before. Like, it was like one of my first conferences. He's like, yeah, let's talk about this. And it was like, it was so like one of those amazing moments where you're like, I'm an idiot. Okay, it's awesome though.
So I did something similar with Captain Crunch way back in the day. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know or I knew who he was. I didn't know what he looked like. And they used to have a Simon Says game with telephones where you had to identify the DTMF tones that they were pressing. And I got in an argument with this older gentleman. And I was like, no, this is this number. And he's like, no, it's this number. It's these two frequencies. I was like, no, it's these two frequencies. And we went back and forth until the end of that round. And it turns out he was right. I had my ass handed to me. And then after the fact, he was like, hey, you got all the other ones right. I don't know why you were so harping on that one. And then we went down, we had a beer and hung out for a little while afterwards. And it was one of those things that he's like, hey, I'm Captain Crunch. And I was like, I know.
You're like, in years later, you're like, now this is even more awkward.
Well,
yeah, when we're talking about contests, though, I think when we're talking about contests, though, moving us off that one, when we're talking about contests, I think that's another one of those like weird like barrier of entries we always feel like I'm not smart enough to do this contest and things like that. There are, this is like one of I love contests. Like anyone who, again, black badges and all that aside, like absolutely love contests because they're one of those things. Like you jump into one where you're like, I have no idea how to do this, and usually there's people to help you, whether it's Darknet or Capture the Packet. But then there's also like contests like the tinfoil hat contest, which is legitimately go grab aluminum foil and make the best tinfoil hat. Like it's not even like a technical thing. It's just like, this is what I love about DEF CON is those are accepted contests. Those aren't like hallway contests, which is a whole nother thing that happens at DEF CON. That is like sit down and make the coolest tinfoil hat you've ever seen. And like even that had like a video on it, which was just fantastic. Like seeing Gowry's wife create an amazing tinfoil hat was pretty amazing.
So to that point, when it comes to different contests, you don't have to be good at them, but you are absolutely making memories now whenever you go to participate in any one of these.
Gowry and I competed in a contest that's, I think, one of the longest running contests at DEF CON, and we won the contest. And we just sat down, and the contest was faking a badge. We've been talking about how you actually acquire a ticket for DEF CON. You can go out and spend the money and buy the ticket, the badge to get into DEF CON, or you can make a forgery. And Gowry and I, we both had legitimate badges that year, but we opted to forge the badge using urinal cakes. And so we designed and came up with a solution and built it and faked out everyone at the con. It was great.
So what did I miss? I left on the call for music and the call for paper and happy health. Sorry, I had to take my puppy outside.
Well, yeah, we ended up talking about contests. The thing I was talking about was like how weirdly approachable they are because it's everything from a tinfoil hat contest to like Capture the Packet and things like that. And saying that the barrier to entry, even to create a contest, doesn't have to be technical because there is tinfoil hat. But I was talking that it used to be Coffee Wars, which was whoever can make the best cup of coffee, and I really want to bring that one back.
There's also, I believe, there's a beer chilling contest. Which is who can chill the beer, who can chill a beer the fastest without freezing it. And that one's like purely physical and like an engineering exercise, which is, I think they've been there for well over a decade now, I think. But I mean, that's how DEF CON Darknet got started, right? We looked at contests and we were like, everything's hyper technical, like everything's CTF, everything is, where do we fit in? And a couple of people basically went, well, there isn't really a good beginner's entry guide to DEF CON type contest. Maybe we could make a little contest that is, tutorialized, hash cracking and tutorialized network hacking and tutorialized binary exploitation. And surprise, surprise, like the community was all about that. You had people who never really taught things before just piling in, and all of a sudden we became a black badge contest, right? So like even things that are, I'm not going to say stupid, even things that seem simple and like aren't going to be big, well-received contests, if you have an idea, there's no harm in just throwing it out there and seeing what DEF CON thinks. It might fit their theme for the year, right? In that case, they have contests every year that I think have anywhere from like 5 to 10 people compete in it. And then they have contests that have 1,200 people compete in it. And so even with talks, there's a wide gamut of things that they try to accept, because there's going to be small niches that maybe probably should be bigger, and they want to try and give them a stage, right? It's kind of cool.
I think the other piece too is when you have the small villages all over the place, like lockpicking villages, even if like your talk isn't like great for the grand stage or rejected, because even Darknet in the DEF CON FAQ, they talk about this. If your talk is rejected, it might be for any number of reasons. Someone else could have submitted the same talk, or it might not fit the theme. But you have all the villages who also accept talks, and all the contests accept talks, and hardware hacking has all talking engagements. And that's what's so cool about it, is like I feel like one of the pieces of advice I give all the time is like, be really selfish with your time. Is you have limited time at DEF CON. So if you find yourself not learning something or not enjoying something, or we talked about finding that douche canoe who comes up to me. He's like, I am so much smarter than you. You walk away from that person because they're a terrible person, and you go find something you actually do enjoy.
So,
Yes.
because to your point, Silk, 4 days is not enough DEF CON time. You literally have to go for years to try to make it from one side to the other side because there's so much to do. So the important thing is for you to find out what interests you. There is more content than you can consume. And my opinion at that point, talks are recorded. Go to those later. Unless it's going to affect you next week. Go to the contests. Go to the villages and see the community at work.
I'll say something straight and I'll hand it to Gulo, which is that if you show up for the week before DEF CON, that's not the same as getting a full week of DEF CON. That is way too much of Vegas for 1 week.
Oh, gosh.
Or for a lifetime, really. We showed up for like 10 days once, and we were like, never again. Never again. That's not the same as going to DEF CON for 5 days. So anyway, go ahead, Gulo.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. Also, there's an energy barrier for DEF CON. It being 4 days, 5 days long, it's going to be, if you're able to survive that long, I don't know if you can survive a few more days because generally we don't sleep. We just go on and party and drink and then learn and hack and then party and drink and learn and hack. We were there for literally 10 days beforehand, and I'm already booking my hotels for almost a week beforehand again because I have a lot of prep that I have to do in Vegas this year, and I'm not looking forward to that aspect. Living at the Denny's and in a hotel room is not fun.
I think something that was so interesting to me is like some of the like you talk about like, oh, hack and drink. Like I remember when I was competing in Darknet, like it was legitimately you land, it opens up, you do Darknet the entire time and you don't stop. Like there's no partying, there's no drinking, there's no nothing that year. Like I dedicated myself every minute to that. And the reason I say that is because I think like when you're doing DEF CON, you really have to do it your own way. And there's not just one DEF CON. Every DEF CON I've gone to has been considerably different. And I think that's kind of the fun of it. It's so big. So I either way, I take exception to the hack and drink because there's so much more to do it than just like party and rave. But if you want to do that, there's also that. And there's a call for party. And there's a call for papers for parties.
And so to the point is that if you've not gone to DEF CON before, come to DEF CON. Secondarily, if you've gone to DEF CON, take a look, open up your community like Silk was talking about. Make that circle and have that open spot. And if you want to get more involved, there are a bunch of people looking for volunteers. That is one of the best ways for you to get even more networking going on as well. But once you get into the volunteering side, it can absolutely bring in more time and more connections. It's also going to take away some of that time too.
Yeah, I'll move us to another topic, which is like there was all these like stand-up contests. Also, I love like one of my favorite contests. Again, isn't a technical one. I really want to do it this year. Is the whose slide is it anyway? Have you seen this contest?
Oh yeah, man. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic contest. Effectively, like you walk up and they just throw some random slide deck up and you need to present on it. It pretty much starts feeling like every conference call I go on recently is just someone's like talking to a slide deck they've never seen before. But like in this case, they give something like aerospace reverse engineer, whatever something they're throwing on the slide where the speaker has no idea what it is. But if you had to pitch a talk, contest, music, whatever it is, right now, what would you pitch? And I'll give you like a minute to come up with an idea. And I'm gonna take the easy way out, which is like I would totally do Coffee Wars because I think that's freaking phenomenal because hackers need great coffee. But if you had to pitch a talk, contest, anything right now, what would it be? I'm putting you all on the spot.
You need to have hold music for something like this. You can't put us on the spot and then leave dead air. Come on.
Okay.
What
about those in chat? Can you think of any what would you pitch right now as your call for papers? Gulo?
So if we're talking about talks, I've got a bunch of talks that I could do. I got a
also this is
one
terrifying
on SNMP exploitation if I wanted to go down the 0-day route because I've had this SNMP exploit in my quiver for like 16 or 17 years now, and it's still not fully patched everywhere.
It's community
it's
strings.
not fixed.
We've already heard about
it's not fixed in a lot of areas. But then again, I would also give talks on DEF CON, on parties, on statute of limitations. Gowrie mentioned that
Oh,
DEF CON is a
gosh.
con that you do and don't talk. You don't talk because you have to wait for statute of limitations to expire for the shenanigans that you do, because they will find you. Trust me, they will find you.
Goodness.
Yeah,
Gula would
there's
know.
always a talk that is like breaking some federal law. I mean, the FBI almost raided DEF CON that one year. They were going to set up their own 3G towers, right?
Well, DEF CON did.
They got permission. They got permission, and they pulled the right licenses that year. The following
Yeah.
year is a different issue.
Yeah, Ninjatel. Yeah. Now, there was a talk where I did see the FBI raid the stage live, and they pulled the speakers off the stage and dragged them out. They dropped a zero. It wasn't really a 0 day. It was a, this is open to the internet. This is how you map a network from a website. And they started mapping missiledefense.gov and like FBI.gov and listing servers and usernames live on stage. And there were people in the audience who lost their shit and didn't like that. So that was a storming the stage event, as they're being like, we're not from this country. Can you please contact a lawyer to help us?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say is I think there's something to be said about just walking into a random talk, not knowing like what in the world is like what you're actually walking into. Because I think the last time I did that was the RFID, or was it the NFC, not NFC, yeah, NFC,
NFC?
the NFC gun, where everyone held up, handed a bunch of NFCs out throughout the entire audience, and he asked them to hold it up in the back, and you only typically read NFCs from like, right underneath your phone, like 3 inches away, and he had this massive antenna on stage. He was just whipping across and reading like ones which were like, 100 yards, the farthest back in the audience.
Nice.
And that one was
man.
terrifying, where he's like anyone who, and again, obviously a joke, but at the same time, he's like, anyone who's pregnant or has a pacemaker, you might want to leave the stage, but you're not really sure because it's a huge antenna.
So that was the year. That was the year. I actually remember that year. Well, I might remember that year because I was still in the Navy, and they had warned us the following year. They were like, don't bring your identification badges with you because they can be scanned from across the room. And we were like,
Because
who is doing that? Like, who is
because the
stupid
year
enough
prior
bring
to that, somebody was going through and wrapping the door frames with coil and had a computer reading everybody that was walking through the door. So people, it was what's going on
We
here?
went out to the desert. There was a group of us that went out to the desert, and we were trying to see how far away we could measure, how far away we could read those NFC tags. And we got to like 1.2 miles where we could accurately read an NFC tag. It was those near field communications where saying it's only accurate up to 6 inches. No, you can do that shit from a mile away. And I remember there was a biohacking talk where they were hacking insulin pumps, and they had the insulin pump on stage. It was hooked up to water, and it just started. He's like, and this is how you execute this, and it starts spurting water. And he's like, this is how you assassinate foreign dignitaries who have insulin pumps.
Oh gosh.
And you're like,
oh no. So I wanted Silk's original question was what talk would so people we were talking amongst us recently about whether or not we and when I say we, I mean DEF CON Darknet should submit a talk on, and I think maybe like I've come up with a title which would be accidentally creating a black badge contest, because no one we definitely didn't intend that, right? In fact, and I say we, like I joined a few years after it started. I think I joined in Darknet 5. So it had already been going for 5 years. And my understanding was like Schmitty never intended this to be a contest at all. He just intended it to be the badge. And then someone decided, oh, we'll make some challenges. And then it turned into a contest. And then all of a sudden it was a black badge contest. And it was like and then it's evolved. Since then it's evolved and grown a life of its own. It might actually be interesting in telling that story. Do you guys think that would be worth submitting a paper on?
I'll go on Gator and then I'll jump on.
one of the things that's interesting about DEF CON is that there are no guaranteed black badges unless it's the
CTF.
CTF, right? So what DEF CON usually does is they go
One sec.
around.
That's CTF, not the CTF. And apparently there is a difference. There's the CTF and the SEATF. And then there's also like 8 other CTFs. So
Capture
not
the
to
flag.
be confused. The
DEF CON
official
capture the flag.
CTF.
So the DEF CON capture the flag that you have to go through pre-qualifications a year before to actually get to where you're on a team playing at DEF CON, and that's the only thing that you're doing. Everything else happens when they're going around physically at DEF CON and seeing how the contests are interacting with the community and how the community is interacting with the contests. And then at that point, they go through and start saying, okay, this year you're going to be a black badge. This year you're going to be a black badge. So long story short, any contest can be a black badge, and they're driving us to make sure that we're able to interact with the community. So the best thing that you can do is interact with your community.
Yeah. To be honest, like as far as we know, they roll dice, and that's how they decide what's going to be a black badge contest, right? Like
it definitely feels like that.
And that's actually it keeps us like centered on like the first year it happened where like we got it, and then the next year we weren't that contest. There was a little grumbling, and then we were like, no, wait, that's not the point of this. All right, we need to, get back on track with focusing on enriching people.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that from the player's perspective because those were the years I played Darknet. I wasn't on the operatives team, and I remember when it was like the story which brought me up to the point before we found because I was competing in it. I was actually like I wanted to win, but it was a lot with Darknet was about the community. Like you were pairing badges and you're exchanging codes and you were solving challenges. There were challenges that you needed like 2 or 3 people to really form a team and get past those ones. But what I really liked about it was it because it wasn't a black badge challenge, everyone kind of worked together. And the moment it was announced it was a black badge challenge, all of a sudden it was it kind of killed the community in some senses because everyone was competing. So I love the fact that the next year it wasn't really announced it was one or it wasn't one, and it's become a mystery. And I think that's helped out a lot of contests. From the player's perspective, though, because that 1 year DEF CON 22, it was a black badge, I was then able to justify all the challenges I had to do, which involved Bunny running around with no pants and me chasing him, because that's a normal thing you do at DEF CON, chasing a bunny around without pants.
Chasing a bunny.
Yeah.
So to that point, when we're talking about the DEF CON and different not the podcast. Sorry. Wow. Completely screwing this one up. When we're talking about being able to see what is a black badge and what isn't a black badge, ultimately, if you're still there to learn, that's what should be driving it. And we had to change that as community and contest runners to make sure that it focused back on the community again versus, hey, we didn't want the toxicity of somebody coming in, sweeping and saying, oh, we're going to all boost one player to do X, Y, or Z. Nah, we're literally trying to build community and welcome anyone who's ever come to DEF CON, whether you're just first brand new year, never touched anything on a computer, and teaching you step by step these different processes. And then for the more advanced folks, here are some challenges that you'll find. Then for the intermediate folks, you know what? No. This one's going to make you scratch your head.
So I was just going to say, reading a comment here, Buffer Mike said, that's another huge reason I want to go. The networking seems like it's next level. Here's the thing about networking at DEF CON. You need to engage with something in order to network, right? Because the reason why the 4 of us are on stream is because we, put time in and help to run DEF CON Darknet together. I never actually played it. I saw it as an opportunity to get involved in the contest, and it was fun. But don't expect to show up and then. Here's one of the things we're talking about DEF CON being a really accepting environment, and it is, but don't expect to show up and then have people just be like, what kind of hacker are you? No, you need to get involved in something and then find what I like to say is find your people at DEF CON. Find the thing you want to work at DEF CON and then find your group. This is our group, right? And it's not that we're not looking to expand. It's just the way we networked at DEF CON was by showing up and dedicating time to a particular contest or a particular set of challenges or whatever year after year. And then all of a sudden we were like, hey, wait a minute, are we friends? When did that happen? Like, we were just random people that showed up to the conference year over year and then never talked to each other outside the conference other than that and planning meetings. But then all of a sudden, we like the past couple of years, we were like, man, I really miss my hacker family. I need to. And we were like, wait, when did that happen? So networking comes with time. So I wouldn't show up expecting like you're going to show up one year and then you're going to just explode into having all of these people that, you know, suddenly you're close with. You need to come engage, and over time you'll find your people at DEF CON.
So as far as that goes, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. There are people there that absolutely despise me, which is great. But you go there and you can network. And I have a story from DEF CON 15 where I was outside of a talk that had filled up, couldn't go in, and I sat down in the hallway, and there's another guy that sat down, and he's like, man, this sucks. I wanted to really attend this talk. And I was like, hey, what do you do? Who are you? Blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, I'm a printer technician. I fix printers, but I'm trying to get into security. And I sat down and I talked with him for like an hour or two. And it was great. Really cool dude, really smart guy. He knew what he wanted and he was going for it. He was just starting out though. The following year at DEF CON, I was just randomly walking through the contest area, and this guy grabs me by the shoulder, slams me down in a chair, and drops a laptop in front of me and says, I need you to figure out this puzzle. And I'm like, who? What? And I look around, I look up at him. I'm like, oh, you're the dude from last year I was talking with. He's like, yeah. We're doing this we're doing this CTF. I need your help. And so I spent the time and I solved a couple of flags, and then I taught his entire group how to solve these flags. The year after that, he started a hackerspace, and it became a large hackerspace. And now he's actually really high up in the security community. He's far outgrown me and anything I could have ever shown, taught, or done with him. His career skyrocketed. He's doing phenomenal. He gives talks all over the country. He's doing incredibly well. And every time I see him, it's just giant hugs all around. The community that you build and the people that you meet will last for years and years. Never discount the people that you will meet and who they are then and who they can become.
I think something Gowrie said hits it on the head, which was like, you have to find your tribe at DEF CON. And I think it takes, unfortunately, I wish there was like an easier way of doing this, but I think it kind of just takes time and exposure. I think, like, so I just did a video which was talking about like this. Again, let's plug the videos. No, it was kind of like the stages to learning. In the summary, don't even watch the video, because at the end of the day, it was, and the first step is just get going. Get out there, learn a ton of things. Like when you're wanting to become a hacker, go learn a ton of things, because the whole goal is to try and get exposure to a lot and find out what you enjoy. And the next step is like get good at that one thing, find your niche, and then like get smart with it and how to apply it to the business. But I think that same concept works at DEF CON, and you have to kind of like expand outwards. Like when I got there, I tried amateur CTF. I tried going to the talks, and I think maybe you outgrow those things, but it took some time. And like, I think the contests for me was where I helped find, like it helped me find the tribe, because it forced me to interact with people. Like when you go to like one, which is maybe like a little outside your technical level, it's going to force you to talk to people. And I think Gowrie hit it on the head. You need it. There's not going to be like, teach me, senpai. My body is ready. Everyone come to me. Like that doesn't really happen. You have to push. And like I think it was actually Heck 7 who's listening in. Like how I bumped into him was I'm walking down the hallway, exhausted. I put my camera away. I was like on the way to go to the pool, like jump in the pool and take my glamour shot of Gowrie, which is now just online. Anyone who wants to watch it can watch that. Yeah, it's so beautiful. But like he just set up in a hallway, and he started setting up his rig, which I'm not even going to use any of the terms because I'm going to butcher them. But he just like set it up, and it was like, if you build it, they will come. He set it up, and all of a sudden he just showed people like, here is how I make awesome music in the hallway, and people gathered around. And I think like anytime you can bring something interesting to DEF CON 2 might allow you to be like, come to me. Like PepperCon. Here is this hot thing we can all eat, and people just gather around. Free liquor might work too. I don't know.
Let us torture ourselves for your entertainment. Go ahead,
So I actually kind of disagree with finding your tribe at DEF CON. I mean, you can go out and find your tribe. Ooh, we lost a gator. You can go out and find your tribe, but I belong to multiple tribes at DEF CON, and it's because there's a couple reasons. One, I'm an introvert, if you can't tell, and two, it's I always want to learn things. So I would go there and I would try to learn things. So I would take part in different contests, different talks, different activities at DEF CON so I could learn things. But I also wanted to break out of my shell. I wanted to not be comfortable. So I would go out and I would find a new part of the community. I would go take part in scav hunts. I would go do crazy things. I would go to parties. We would go to RollerCon, or not RollerCon. Yeah, RollerCon at DEF CON, when the Derby Girls and the security hacking conferences line up. The hackers usually have more alcohol at their parties, and RollerCon usually has more women at their parties. So then we combine the parties together, and they're just epic. But those were things where I can sit down with multiple groups at DEF CON because I put myself out there to become part of multiple groups. I can go to the Hardware Hacking Village. I can go to the contests. I can go hang out with goons. I can go hang out with the music, the DJs. I built my tribe of multiple different tribes because I want to experience and I want to not be comfortable in the situations that I'm in. Yeah, that is some hot stuff right there.
No, my intent in saying find your people at DEF CON is not to like find a tribe that already exists. Like that's not how networking works, right? Like if you go to DEF CON long enough, people start to know you, right? And then you develop your own group. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
thank you for
to
pulling
that
up.
point,
I like what's up?
Oh gosh.
so to that Whoa, sorry guys. So to that point, yeah, they decided to cut the power, so I'm on mobile now. To that point, be the change that you want to see. Woo! Be the change that you want to see. So if you don't have a hackerspace in your area, it's not hard to get one. Literally, grab a pizza. You could go to a college. You could go to a cyber cafe. You can have a couple friends online within your group already existing. You don't have to physically do it. You could do it online as well. So nothing is stopping you from creating the community.
Yeah, so with that, I think this is probably a good place to start wrapping, which is the truly like I think the barrier to entry for DEF CON is not crazy high. It really isn't. I think it's just show up, you try and find your community, and you can do that a lot of different ways. Go try a contest, go to a talk, go just sit down at a random table. But I think if you're ever even you don't need to be an expert to submit for a call to papers. And that's one of the things which was so interesting to me, and I love the fact that a lot of the talks aren't like they're not overly technical, and I think that's kind of the fun of it. But with that, I think this is probably the place I'm going to go and hand it off to Gator, and you can go ahead. What is your final thoughts on this one?
So go to DEF CON, go to learn, and go love your hacker family.
Gowrie?
Oh, yeah. I would say if you have an idea for something to submit to the call for papers or call for parties or any of those things, go look at we should probably drop the call for, I don't know if we dropped the link to this, but we should probably drop the link to the call for everything index and submit. I mean, we keep saying the worst they can say is no, and that is literally the worst thing that they can say, right? And I say that from years of experience, having been told no from many, many conferences. Eventually you're just like, yeah, I must have worn the wrong color shirt that day, and that's why I didn't get accepted, right? So like don't let one denial, get ruffle your feathers. Just keep going and keep submitting. You'll find something that works.
Mm-hmm. Gulo?
It's surprising what we care about. We don't care about what the talk is. We don't care about what the music is. We don't care about what the art is. We care about the passion behind it. As long as you're passionate about what you do, people will follow.
With that, thank you for joining us on Hacker Hangouts. Thank you for bearing with some of the technical issues we've had. I'm hoping I get to meet so many of you at DEF CON because, truthfully, it's not that far off. We're going to get there, and it's going to be awesome. DEF CON 30, Thanks for watching, and hack on.